If you're looking for a refreshing summertime treat, I have the perfect solution for you here. These are my delicious light lemon bars, but you don't have to stick to lemon. You could do lime or orange also. These are so good, I can't wait to dig in. And if you'd like to know how they're made, stick around because it's coming up next. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. My name's Roy. I'm a home cook and amateur baker, and I'm here on this channel sharing recipes that have helped me to lose over 125 pounds, whether those recipes are mine or someone else's. Now today is one of mine, but it's not original to me. Everyone's had lemon bars at some point in their life. You can buy them in the supermarket, but can you get them so that they're low bite, low cal? Now you can. I came up with a recipe for lemon bars early on in my weight loss journey, but they didn't quite satisfy, they weren't quite right. So I had to keep working at it until I got it correct, and I finally did. So let's go over the ingredients. I have here some tea biscuits. I did try making these with graham crackers, making a graham cracker crust, but that graham cracker flavor kind of overrode the lemon. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't letting the lemon shine through the way I wanted it to. So you can replace the tea biscuits for graham crackers, for pizzelles, for any sort of vanilla cookie that is a kind of hard, crispy cookie. Now, I used to buy Paul all the time Nabisco Social Teas. That was their tea biscuits. They have been nowhere to be found, but I did find these Kedem. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name. I think it's Kedem. But I found these and they're relatively cheap. It was like 99 cents for this package. And they're usually found with the Jewish foods. But I did notice when I went shopping, for some reason, the sign over them said European. I don't know why they couldn't just say Jewish foods, but anyway, it may be in the Jewish food section or European food section, something like that. You can also get them from Amazon, and that's what I've done before. So if you can't find them in your store, do check Amazon. I do have them listed in my Amazon storefront if you're trying to find them. Now those are obviously for the crust. Also for the crust, I have 2 tablespoons of light butter. I can't believe it's not butter light, and I am going to melt that down a little bit. Here I have 1 tablespoon of lemon juice just to enhance the lemon flavor. Now, I'm using bottled lemon juice. You don't have to, you can use fresh. If you use fresh, I would advise that maybe you zest a lemon and put half of it into the crust and half of it into the filling. I mean, if you're gonna use fresh lemons, you might as well get the most bang for your buck. Here I have 2 tablespoons of sugar replacement. I use the all-purpose in the raw. I've mentioned that before, and I always show a picture so you know what it looks like. But any sweetener that you wanna use is fine. And finally, I have here a pinch of salt, and that's just to bring out some of the sweetness. Those are the crust ingredients, just 5 items. For the filling, there's only 4. Here I have 3 eggs that are at room temperature. Again, I know I'm a broken record about this, but especially when you're baking, it is better to have your ingredients at room temperature so they come together more readily. If something is cold and something else is cold and you're trying to mix them together, they're gonna be resistant to that, so have them at room temperature. Here I have half a cup of lemon juice, and again, that is from the bottle, although you can use fresh. Here I have 3/4 of a cup of sweetener, the same one I'm using in the crust, obviously. And I only needed 3/4 because I'd used a little bit more, but it got a little too sweet and kind of like took away some of that little lemon tang that you want in a lemon bar. So I reduced that down to 3/4 of a cup. And I have here 1/4 cup of flour, and that is just going to help our filling to set and bind together. And I have here some cooking spray. I am going to be using parchment to line my pan, but I like to use some cooking spray on the pan itself so that way the parchment is less likely to slide around while I'm trying to put that crust in there. So those are all of the ingredients. Let me shuffle a few things around and we'll get started. All right, so I wanted to start off by showing you how I fit a parchment into my pan. I've shown it in previous videos, but in case you haven't seen those, and you could use foil for this. You could even not use anything if you don't mind cutting into your pan and trying to get the bars out that way. But I prefer removing them from the pan and not scoring the pan by cutting into it. So I've already sprayed the pan with some cooking spray. Now what I'm gonna do is just take my scissors, I have the parchment underneath, and I'm just gonna go in at an angle and go right towards that corner. And what I'm doing is making little flaps that can fold in. And then carefully spin it, because your pan will wanna slide a little bit while you're doing this, and it did shift a little. But just cut all four corners, and you can go a little bit further in than when you touch the pan, because you will need a little extra room. I'm just gonna give myself an extra snip around on each one. Then I'm going to slide the pan in and lay this parchment on top. Then I'm just going to push in on the sides and let one edge of the parchment be the inside piece. And you will need to maneuver it a little bit, move it around to get that in there. But the cooking spray is helping it to stay in place. As I said, you can use foil for this. I prefer not to, just because of the wrinkles that you would get by getting the foil in here. I mean, not that you can't get wrinkles in the bar from the parchment, but it is a little less likely. And there we have our lined pan, so I'm going to set that off to the side and bring in my rolling pin and bag. Now what I'm going to do is I need 24 cookies. This package is 4 servings of 6 biscuits each. So there should be 24, which is what I want. But I am going to count them out just to make sure I don't mess with the bites, points, calories, or macros. So just let me get these into the bag. Okay, it's a good thing I counted, because there are actually 29 cookies in here. And that really would have thrown off my bites and points. Not by much, but it wouldn't have been as accurate. So I have 24 in my baggie. These I'll save for a snack later on. I'm going to take the bag and seal it, but I'm going to take as much air out of it as I can, because we're going to be crushing them. You can use your hand, you can use the rolling pin, and you want as much air out as you can, because when you are banging on it, you don't want the air to expand and bust your bag. So I'm just going to take the cookies and going to roll over them. Now you could do this in a food processor, but I think it becomes too fine in a food processor unless you're really watching it. So I just prefer doing it this way. It's quick, it's easy, and I get some nice texture in here. So let me get these mashed up and I'll be back. So I've got my cookies all crumbled up. There are some larger pieces, not too large, but you do want some larger crumbs, some smaller crumbs to give it a bit of texture. Now what I'm going to do is take the sugar replacement and add that in along with the salt, and I'll just stir that through a little bit, get that dispersed a little more evenly. I did melt the butter. It took about 15 seconds in the microwave, so I'm just going to add that in along with the lemon juice and just mix that together. And at first it's going to seem like there is not enough liquid in here for this to come together, but it will come together once you work it a little bit. You'll see the crumbs starting to moisten and soften, and you want to kind of press down on it to help get that incorporated in there. And just keep working it until you see it starting to really stick together. But when you press down on it like this, you want it to see it start to get compact. And it will, as I said, still look a little crumbly, but that's okay. Now I'm going to bring in my pan and just pour this all in here. So I'm going to spread it out a bit with my hands just to get it where it's going to be. And then I'm just going to use my spatula and compact everything down. You could use your hands, but it may stick to your hands where it won't to this spatula. So just press that out into the corners, up against the edges. And it's okay if there's a slight ledge at the edge, because that way when we pour our lemon filling in, it will hold it more in place. But it's also fine if it doesn't. Sometimes the lemon will seep underneath the crust, which is fine. It doesn't really affect it at all. But that looks good right there. It looks nice and even. So now this is going into a 325-degree oven for 15 minutes so we can let that firm up. And when it's done, it will be a bit firm to the touch. So I'll be back. Okay, so while the crust is baking, we're gonna make the filling because we wanna put the filling into the hot crust. So I'm just gonna use the same bowl I just mixed the crust in. I'm not gonna clean it out or anything like that. So I'm going to add in the eggs, and then I just wanna break those up a little bit just to get them loosened up to incorporate with everything else. And because they are at room temperature, that will happen much more quickly. So now I'm going to add in the sweetener and the lemon juice and do the same thing, just mix until it's all combined carefully so that I don't spill any of this goodness. Then I'm going to add in the flour, but I'm going to do it slowly while I'm whisking, so that way I'm less likely to develop clumps of flour in here. So just sprinkle that in and whisk. And you may still see little specks of flour clumped up, but don't worry about that. That's going to work itself out. Okay, so now I just have to wait for that crust to come out. Okay, so here is our crust. It took about 18 minutes, and it's firm but not hard, and that's what you're looking for. Now that the crust is ready, we're just going to pour in our filling, and it will, as I said, seep down underneath the crust a bit, but that just helps the flavor to permeate all throughout this bar. All right, so the filling is in there. I do see little clumps of flour, but as I said, that'll work itself out. You wanted to have kept your oven on at 325. So I'm going to put this in the oven for about 22 to 25 minutes until it's set. And when you jiggle it, there's no real shaking in the center. So 22 to 25 minutes, and I'll be back. All right, so here are the lemon bars fresh out of the oven, and you can see there are a couple of little cracks. Those don't bother me, but if they do bother you or you want to present them a little better, what you can do is put your pan inside of a larger pan with some water and let that steam keep the air in the oven moist. That will help with any cracking, the same as you do with a cheesecake. Or you can put another pan of hot water underneath the rack that this one is on and still keep that moisture in the air. But honestly, that doesn't bother me, but if it does for you, then that is a solution you can use. All right, and now it is time for everyone's favorite game, the waiting game. Now we have to let this sit and cool completely in the pan. Then we're going to refrigerate it before cutting them. If you cut it when it's still room temperature, it does tend to pull a little bit on the knife. So it's easier if they are refrigerated. So give me a few hours, or for you, a few seconds, and I'll be back with some lovely lemon bars. All right, so it has been a few hours. I let it sit on the counter on a cooling rack for an hour, then put it into the fridge for about 2 while we had dinner. So now it's nicely set up and it will be easier to cut. So I'm just going to lift it right out of the pan, and then I'll cut it right on the parchment paper rather than trying to transfer the whole thing off of the parchment paper. It's much easier to take individual bars off so you can put them away. But before I do any cutting, I have here half a tablespoon of powdered sugar. Now this is real powdered sugar, but you could use a powdered sugar replacement. However, the bites and points aren't going to change. The macros and calories obviously will slightly. It's not going to alter anything for us if we are on bites and points. So I'm going to put it into a sieve and just tap to dust all around. This is very well dusted, and you may want to wait to dust it with sugar until you're ready to serve it, because if it sits for a while, the sugar will kind of absorb into the bar, but it's not going to hurt it either way. If you wanted to do them individually, you could do up to 3/4 of a teaspoon, which is much more than you would need. for 0 bites, 0 blue points. You might only need a 1/4 teaspoon, if that, if you were doing individual bars. But this does serve 16 the way I'm doing it. You could do it serving 12, but I actually found the piece that I get from a serving of 16 is sufficient. So I'm just going to cut it into 16 pieces. I'm going to do my best to eyeball it. If you've watched this channel at all, I am not great at getting even lines, even when I use a ruler, so I'm not even gonna bother with that. I'm just gonna go halfway through the center one way, and then cut each of those in half. And then I'm going to do it in the other direction, and that will give us 16 servings. And there you have it. Then it's a little easier to remove them from the parchment paper rather than trying to lift the whole thing off at once. But that's all there is to it. Serving it up as 16, you still get a fairly decent size, so don't think 16 is going to give you an itsy bitsy piece. And the lemon flavor, if you love lemon, this is great. Now, you could, if you wanted, you could make these into lime bars. You could make them into orange bars. So if you prefer a different citrus fruit, don't be afraid to experiment with this. Get a flavor that you really like. Now on to the nutrition facts for these. Each bar is going to be 2 Better Balanced Bites or Old Blue Points. I am on the Healthy Better Balanced plan, which is equivalent to the old WW Blue plan, and where it falls on the current plan is around there somewhere. I know some things are a little higher or lower than they used to be on the Blue plan. But if you are following calories, the calories for one of these is only 64. And if you are following macros, the fat is 2.7 grams. The saturated fat is 0.8 grams. The protein is 1.9 grams. The carbs are 21.3 grams. Fiber is 0.4 grams. And sugars are 1.7 grams for one of these tasty little bars. But if you like this recipe and this video, I'd appreciate you doing the usual. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and hit that notification bell for the next time I upload any sort of video. We do have a collab coming up this coming Sunday that I am hosting for summertime snacks and sweets. So get ready for some healthy ways to spoil yourself this summer. And if you want the recipe for this, it is, of course, linked directly down below in the description box, as is the link to my blog itself if you're looking for any of my recipes. Check it out there. There's also my Amazon storefront, my social media, both my Instagram and 3 Facebook groups that I'm part of. So check out that description box for all sorts of information. Well, dinner is over, so I think it's time for me to have a little sweet treat. And I hope you'll be doing the same soon yourself. So until next time, bye.